Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Big View, Ending Poverty in Your Community. At Circles, our mission is building community to end poverty through intentional friendships, personal transformation, and systemic change, led by the people closest to the challenge. And our vision for the future is all individuals live in equitable and thriving communities where poverty no longer exists.
Hello and welcome everyone to the final episode in season 2 of our Big View podcast, the Big View Mindset. So, as always, I am Kris Alexander. I'm the Chief Learning Officer at Circles USA, and I am joined with my co-host and Executive Director, Kamatara Johnson at Circles USA. Welcome, Kamatara.
Good to see you all again, and thanks to everyone who's listening and joining us for another round. I love the topic this time.
I am so excited about the topic today. So today we are talking about generative dialogue. And what makes this such an awesome topic to kind of round up this season of this mindset is that you need all of the other things that we've been talking about to have to participate in generative dialogue. So and we'll talk more about that kind of at the end. But for now, let's just dive in. But first, for those of you on video, Kamatara got some new kitties, and we've already had a guest appearance. Do you want to introduce your friend?
Well, this is our special guest today, Theo. And if you see a little gray tabby running across the screen, that's Billy. So they are our subject matter experts in Zen, peacefulness, and being in the now, which is super helpful when we're doing very intense anti-poverty work. So I'm appreciating my kittens right now for their healing qualities and remembering to just breathe and sit and all that goodness. So thank you for the nod to the precious kittens that are on video if any of you want a little moment of Zen.
Yes. And we'll see if we can get a picture from Kamatara to put onto the website podcast page as well for our special guests. So anyways, moving on, jumping right in. So let's first define generative dialogue. And I am going to define generative, but then Kamatara, you had a lot of really interesting ideas about dialogue and all of that. So I'm going to have you take that. But to begin, generative is producing or creating. Really, generation is producing or creating, but then this generative is producing or creating something new.
Yes.
So it's kind of that one step beyond into this, like, when I think of generative, it's this really like creative up-leveling like evolutionary sort of process.
Yes.
And then what's about dialogue?
So as a former English teacher, I cannot resist the Latin and Greek roots and prefixes and things like that. So, when you have a dialogue, you're taking part in a conversation or a discussion. And specifically with generative dialogue, we are trying to resolve a specific problem. There is a specific topic, like we are coming together to make meaning together and to discover something we would not have discovered without each other. But the interesting thing about the word dialogue and conversation, first off, dialogue, logos, the log part, logos means logic, like reasoning, and die means what, like two or more. So it's not me monologuing, it's us dialoguing. Like we are sharing our logic and reasoning together. And oftentimes, as we've, many of us experienced, sometimes a dialogue isn't a dialogue. It's two people monologuing at each other.
Mm-hmm.
But dialogue means the back and forth. In fact, the word conversation is interesting too, because con means with, and verse means to turn. Like if you're versatile, you can turn one way or the other, or there's verses in a song, there's lots of turns in the song. And so when you are conversant or you are conversing, we get to take turns, we get to share the meaning, and then that's where actually we can get to something that is generative, something that's better than what I could have done alone. Because if I could have done it alone, I would have done it already,
Yeah.
but I can't.
Yeah.
And so when we get to generative dialogue, that's where the magic happens. Like we know in circles, it's all about relationships, and how what we can do together is so much better than what we can do apart. It's that interdependency that creates the solutions, and also the connections and the deepening that we need for community building. So generative dialogue is at the heart of what we do in our circles chapter, and it's essential for the big view process.
Absolutely. Well, and I love that was such a like well-rounded definition. And what always kind of comes up for me is if you only leave with like the ideas, information, and wisdom that you entered into a conversation with, then it actually wasn't generative dialogue. It was a discussion, a debate, right? A generative dialogue, everybody leaves like something more is created. And it's that kind of like exponential, right? Like it's not the sum of like, oh, there's two of us talking, so we come out with two things. It's like this exponential sort of like creation ability that happens with dialogue. With that being said though, dialogue is unique, right? It's not something we see every day, unfortunately, currently in our society. And it really requires a lot of intentional sort of like preparation for it.
Yes.
So, the first thing that generative dialogue requires is trust.
Mm,
And
yes.
yeah, something that I feel like it can be really challenging to enter into a conversation or dialogue with, especially with somebody maybe we don't know very well and trust. And yet that is what is asked of us. And um it's trusting the other person is coming with the same intention, the same openness, the same willingness. It's sort of that assumption of positive intent that we sometimes talk about a lot in like agreements. It's also trusting the container and that there is something to generate together, and it's trusting that person you were talking about, like the logos, the logic, the reason, trusting that whoever you're dialoguing with has as much information, wisdom, knowledge, and experience to bring to the table as you do, right? Like we all have something to bring to the table. And so it's that foundational sort of like I'm going to show up with my whole self and be like vulnerable and like use my empathic intelligence, which we talked about earlier in the season. Go check it out and work with you, that con with, to create something together.
I love that. That kind of trust is at the heart of what circles does, because we know that transformation moves at the speed of relationships, and relationships move at the speed of trust, and trust comes with you know all of this. Like we can't do our big view work without trusting each other to have the hard conversations or to be honest with each other. So we are assuming positive intent, that we all want the best and highest good for our beloved community and our wonderful community members, or like we we can trust more. In fact, we can build that trust when we do our big view skills, like the active listening. I'm not just going to pounce on you and just say what I think, or no, I can take it in. I can have a beginner's mind, or I can have an open heart. I'm open to learning. So that all of the active listening, the empathic intelligence, those are some great big view skills that deepen that trust. Like the more we practice those, the more we have a safe place to
Mhm.
trust. And then I also love that we encourage folks to ask curious and powerful questions, because then it's not me just talking at you. It's me truly trying to learn. And then we're all learning and growing together. And then we come out with, again, more than what I could have done on my own, which is the change that we really want. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and I love, when I was kind of reading back over all of the information that we have in various places about generative dialogue, that this listening is like if we're debating somebody, we're listening to like find holes in their what they're saying or to like disprove them. Or if we're in a discussion, we might be listening to respond or listening to like share our own story, right? And so that active listening is really listening with the intention of learning something new, like you said. And I just want to pull that out because I don't know how often we listen with that sort of beginner's mind, especially on topics that are so big and important as ending poverty, right? Or systems change work. It's really hard when, especially when we are experts in that arena. It's really hard to say, "Oh, you know something I don't," and yet this is what it's asking of us.
Especially when things are charged, because I don't know about you, but when things are charged, I tend to forget my manners, or I get really excited, and then I just
Mhm,
want to
mhm.
jump in and go for it, as opposed to, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, this is a generative dialogue. Let's set up our ground rules or our norms, or like, this is how we'd like things to go. This is the specific topic. Let's just take a moment to remember the trust that we can have in this room, the active listening that we can do, and, all of our empathic intelligence skills. So it's sometimes just setting that at the beginning of the generative
Mhm.
dialogue can be so helpful, so I can remember myself, because I want to do that. But sometimes when it's charged, or it gets like, I get activated, or I just get excited, and then I accidentally just run over someone, and it's so not on purpose, but it is helpful if I can, yeah, have some ground rules, and then we can, and like you said, we get to practice, which is so important, especially as we're building community, not only for systems change, but just for building community. Like, we want to
Yeah.
be closer and listening to each other and trusting each other more. And if we really do want goodness for our communities, or change, or up leveling, like, there's so much change that can happen when we just listen and then find those community driven solutions, because we just, right now, I mean, that's our deep desire for change. That's what we're aiming for.
Yeah. Well, and that desire for change, this whole thing is about systems change, right? Big View is systems change work
Mhm.
on ending community or ending poverty by building community, ending poverty in your community.
Yes.
And the change is not just systems change or
Mhm.
community change, it's ourselves. Like we are required to change as well. And that is something that, once again, like you're leaving with more than you came with,
Yeah.
which means that you have changed. And I love, so Octavia Butler, I'm going to back up just a little because this is
Mhm.
just one of my like favorite topics. But Octavia Butler, a prophetic fictional writer, go check
Yes.
out her stuff.
Yes.
She says in the parable of the sower, she says, all that you touch, you change. All that
Mhm.
you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change.
Ugh.
And which like, right?
I have goosebumps right now, just hearing that again. I've read that book before. I've done that book with students when I was an English teacher, but just, she's so good,
Yeah.
so powerful.
And then, yeah, so then Monica Coleman and Tananarive Due have a webinar, I believe it's on YouTube, called Octavia Tried to Tell Us. And in that, I know, go check it out,
I have to
Kamatara.
watch it. Maybe we could link it in the program notes. Okay.
Yes, we'll link it in the program notes. And in that, Monica Coleman talks about how if you come into a space and you your desire is to change the other people or to change the space itself, but you are unwilling or refuse to change yourself
Mhm.
in that like touching, then it's actually a colonizer mindset. And like you're trying to get everything to change to look like you, right? And that is not dialogue, right? Kind of shifting it back. And so it's and I think it's really hard for us to enter a space and allow ourselves to be changed, right? Like change is kind of inherently scary for humans, and so that generative dialogue, that's why the trust is so important, because it can be a little like intimidating or scary or vulnerable to come into a space expecting to be changed, and we get to trust that the other person is going to change along with us to create that something new.
Which is the circle's way. We are all growing and
Yeah.
changing together. And the whole issue with poverty is that people are stagnating, either in their income, in their wellness, and they're like they cannot thrive. And so
Mhm.
it's the same for us too. I don't know anyone who's been associated with circles in any way, shape, or form who has not been changed. I think we even warn people like, be prepared for your life to change, like whether you are a staff member, a volunteer, an ally, a champion, a circle leader, a youth member, just everyone is changed. So if we can recognize in ourselves, and I'll just say for me, if I can recognize for me when I might be rigid about something, if I'm like, no, there's only one right way, or there's only one answer here, or it has to be this, or I'm going to pack up my toys and go home. Like, that doesn't work, which we've seen.
Mhm.
And it's not the circle's way. We work together to find community driven solutions. So I have to be open to other people's ideas, which inherently helps me learn more, inherently helps me to change and grow and to expand my view and my understanding. And I think we found across the nation in all of our chapters, when people come together around a topic that they really care about, like here's this cause, poverty, or we are going to work on housing, or whatever the issue is, we all are deepening and growing and understanding and learning more, which is why the perspective of people with lived experience is essential. The perspective of the policymaker who wrote the thing can be really clarifying. And then let's say, the landlords and the folks who are involved on that side, like we need to get all the perspectives to understand. I can't do it alone. But, right now in our country, there's just so many people either, going rogue, going alone, that rugged individualism that we see just doesn't work right now.
Or ever, but I think we were able
Yeah.
to pretend it did for a while, but or
Sorry.
some some people had the privilege of pretending it did, I will say,
Yeah.
not everyone, but yeah, and so kind of on that note, if we take this idea of change and generative dialogue and creating something new, and we look at it through the lens of big view systems
Mhm.
change, right? Because that's what we're here talking about. When we look around, and right now we're recording this in the longest government shutdown in history, right? Because people can't come together and make decisions and allow themselves to be changed, right? And so much I feel like so much of what I hear and what I'm seeing is like focused on proving that I'm right and you're
Yes.
wrong. And there's that I can't think of what it's called right now, but basically the when you are shown factually that you're wrong, you instead like double down on your
Mm.
ideas and
It's one
things
of
and
the
beliefs.
biases. Yeah.
Yes.
When you see all the different kinds of personal bias that folks have.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't think of what the specific name, yeah, the right now like that's what we're seeing, and we're
Mhm.
also seeing in a lot of ways, and a lot of people are experiencing, I think most if not all of us are experiencing how that's not working. And so
Yeah.
generative dialogue really does allow us to like set aside those those binaries and like
Yes.
up level to working together. And one of the things I love about it is that it requires everybody who have the different
Yes.
perspectives to be in the room. So
Yeah.
I think that's another aspect of generative dialogue, is that especially with like algorithms and social media, we can get into these like echo chambers where all we
Yes.
hear is our own ideas echoed back in so many words. And that's actually not, also, even if you're talking to 50 people, but everybody is coming from the same perspective, that also is not generative dialogue. Like it
Mm-hmm.
requires the people that feel really strongly on opposite sides of the idea to come together
Yeah.
and find the commonality. And it's not a win-lose. Like it's not a
Right.
and it's not a compromise. It's literally generating something
New.
brand new that is the combined of both and more.
You
That,
know,
yeah.
the example that comes to mind, I actually learned from Christy Vines, who is the founder of the IDEOS Institute, which actually has shifted to become the Fuller Center of Peace Building and Conflict Transformation as part of the Fuller Theological Seminary. So kudos to you, Christy
Wow.
Vines,
Yeah.
for getting it shifted into that organization. But what a film that they had made was Dialogue Lab America,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and we can link that in the program notes too, where you can see some interesting examples of generative dialogue. And one of them was having parents whose children died by gun violence, and then having people who were pro guns sit down and have that conversation. If you could even imagine being
Mhm.
in that room, I mean, think about that kind of trust and empathy, and what you'd have to set up, but the solutions that you can get at when you get into that kind of radical acceptance and radical hospitality, but and just radical trust. you know
Mhm.
it it just blows me away that can be possible. And they did find common ground. You can find common ground, and we've
Mhm.
experienced that even with things like the cliff effect. We can talk about the families that are suffering, and the working people who want to be working, and we can talk about economic development and getting off of government benefits, that people do want to get off of government benefits. Like, we can find the common ground, and then the solutions come out of what everybody knows, not just one piece of the puzzle. Like, we do need all the different perspectives, and to sit down and just recognize that there's so much that we don't know, that there could be things that we're missing, there could be people we're missing, perspectives we're missing, solutions we hadn't thought of or couldn't even come to on our own.
And well, and what was coming up for me as you were talking about that was, yeah, all sides have something to offer, like you were saying. And there's this book, Navigating Polarities,
Ooh,
um, that was I literally like went on a whole thing for like a year and a half. I filled out this book's style of doing that. But it talks about how it uses breathing as an example. And if we only think that the inhale is important, eventually will pass out. And same thing with the exhale, right? Like both things are necessary. And it's not about a compromise of just sitting stagnant in the middle, right? It's
right.
this like you have to go back and forth continuously and like find a balance that's always moving and changing and shifting and growing. And so I was thinking about that as you were talking. What we tend to do is when we're on like one side or the other, is we tend to only see the positives of our side and not the negatives or the things that are harmful, and we see only the harmful things of the other side.
Mhm.
And so it's like coming together and being able to like recognize the negatives of our own side and the positives of the other side to find that sort of like balance and coming together. Yeah, and that's what we're doing. That's what generative dialogue is.
Well, and if you think about it politically, it's like, okay, one party gets into office and then all the policies swing. And then the next, time there are elections, oh, now this party's in office and the things swing. And then if you just keep going back and forth, your net gain is moot. Or
Yeah.
you're gridlocked, or you actually end up falling behind. And so, what's really tricky, but we've been navigating really well with our chapters, is that because we bring together for a common cause and the love of our communities, we come together across difference. And so, we start to negate that swing or that polarity. And instead of going left, right, left, right, left, right, we go forward. How do we go forward together, which is the heart of generative dialogue? And if our goal is to go forward together with everyone at the table, being fully inclusive, not just the people we like, being fully inclusive, it actually shifts all the energy in the space. Like, even if folks come in like, I'm going to debate, like, there's not even the space for it. People can still be heard. Absolutely. And it's like, yes, and let's open the floor, to hear another perspective. And like, we all get to deepen our skills and step into that up leveling of community that can handle the hard topics, but come out with beautiful, amazing solutions together, which is essential for the big view work that we are so committed to do at Circles.
I think that's such a fantastic place to kind of end this conversation on generative dialogue and do like I want to kind of recap all of the things that we've talked about this season and sort of like frame them into generative dialogue. So you were talking about like having everybody at the table. So our first thing that we talked about this season was centering the people closest to the challenge. And so when we're talking about ending poverty, it's centering the people who are experiencing poverty, who have the lived experience of poverty, and specifically currently, right? Because it shifts so much that we need to make sure that we're centering the people who are in the experience now or recently, not 10 or 15 years ago. I think about this a lot because I did experience poverty. I was in poverty 15 years ago. And I think about today, and if I were to go back to that, I would not have the skills. I would not know what to do because I'm so far removed from that economic place today and what it is to experience poverty in today's landscape versus then, and so making sure that we're not stagnating in that way. And so really that centering those closest to the challenge is asking like who's missing from this table, how do we get them here, how do we ensure that we're hearing those voices and perspectives and ideas.
And that there's more than two sides. It's a
Yes,
false
yes,
argument to say it's this or that. They call it a false dilemma. And
yes.
so to say, oh, it's only this or that. No, there's an infinite number of perspectives. So could we have more than just two perspectives at the table? Could we have multiple perspectives? That way we're being aware of the landscape and not missing some key information or a key perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that also requires us to not tokenize, right? Not say like, oh, well, we have our one person experiencing poverty at the table, so we're good, but rather recognizing like that there is an infinite number of perspectives and opinions and experiences and ideas and getting as many people as we
Yeah.
can. to the table. Um, and then, so next, after we talked about that, we talked about values based organizing and really shifting from problem solution to here are our values
Mhm.
and how do we make sure that the lived experience of everyone is in alignment with those values. And when it comes to generative dialogue, I
Mhm.
feel like sitting in values is really supportive because
Mhm.
I feel like when we really boil down to some of the big picture values, we're all
Yeah.
on the same page, right? Like everybody wants to be safe. Everybody
Yes.
wants to be loved. Like everybody wants community. So if we have like
Yes.
community as our heart value
Mhm.
at the center of these generative dialogues, then we might be coming at how we get to community a million different ways, but we all want the same thing at the heart of it.
And what I love about generative dialogue is we get to live into our values. We say we value being fully inclusive, or we value the lived experience. We value, all the things. Now we get to practice it, which is
Yeah.
really exciting with generative dialogue.
Yeah. Then we talked about transformational relationships, which is really kind of going back to that
Mhm.
allowing ourselves to be changed.
Yes.
Um, because transactional relationships are like, I'm coming to you, we're gonna I'm getting this from you, you're getting that from me, and then we go on our merry way. And so often we try to approach relationships that need to be transformational, like our community, our friends, our family, the people we're doing this work with. We try to approach them as transactional, but that doesn't work because we need to build that community, build that trust,
Yeah.
be in a place where we can show up and allow ourselves to be open and vulnerable and willing to change together. And so those transformational relationships are really imperative in systems change.
It's interesting too to think about the difference between transactional and transformational when it comes to dialogue, because if it's transactional, I monologue, you monologue, we each leave. It's almost like a presidential debate. It's so awkward and ineffective and just bizarre. As opposed to if it's a generative dialogue, it's transformational,
Mhm.
because trans means across. We are reaching across form together. It is transformational for each other as we dialogue, because we are all like learning and growing and changing. So it isn't like check the box. Okay, we showed up and I shared what I knew and you shared what you knew. Okay, now let's leave. It's like, no, no, no. We're creating something new. So we have transformed our understanding, our policies, our practices, our solutions. That so in the context of the relationships that we have in circles, then we can do that kind of hard work together.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that take so much.
Mm.
Um, kind of really in that same vein,
Mm.
we talked about narrative change and just how well it's all the things you just said. And in generative dialogue, that creating something new, we have to be willing to shift the narrative to allow more narratives to exist, to shift the narrative from, especially like internally, I feel like, from this is my experience, so this is it, this is the
Yeah.
opinion, the belief, the right way, to what narratives don't I know, what am I missing here. um yeah, like really just being able to experience more narratives,
Mhm.
and also figuring out how to ensure that those narratives are heard. Like, how can we amplify
Right.
the narratives of the people with the lived experience? Amplify the narratives that we haven't heard before.
And also recognize which narratives are untrue or harmful, because that's been a huge learning curve for so many people, especially getting into circles with a heart of gold, and wanting to volunteer and do great work, and then learning, oh, oh wow, oh, this thing that I've been thinking, even if I'm not quite saying it out loud, oh, that's not true. and then dismantling some of that so that the narrative busting is just as helpful as the narrative changing and amplifying. So everything that surrounds that. And I think generative dialogue is one of the ways to make that happen, because we're actually listening to each other and allowing for more narratives to be present and honored and heard.
Yeah, and that's such a good reminder also, is what narratives do I believe that are actually myths, and
Yeah.
who has a narrative that's based in fact and truth, and how can I make sure to hear those so I can shift my own narrative and belief. Um, and all of that requires empathic intelligence, which is the next thing we talked about, which is really going beyond just either feeling what you feel or understanding intellectually what somebody else feels, to um, deeply like being able to both feel and understand, even if we haven't experienced the same thing, but we're truly willing to believe somebody when they tell us their experience, and then walk a mile in their shoes, really kind of show up to them on that same like connected level and say, I'm here with you, I hear you, I see you, I believe you. That kind of willingness to open ourselves, set aside our own
Mhm.
beliefs, ideas, thoughts, feelings, to be with the person.
Right. I also love the piece of empathic intelligence that helps me not only outward with other people, but then also with myself as well. Like, oh, am I activated right now with this? Or am I feeling this right now? Or am I struggling because of my own emotions? Oh, okay, I need to understand, what do I need to be okay in this moment, which also helps me to be more empathic with other people who might be, at a different time struggling, or at the same time, like, can I just even recognize there's way more than, let's say, logic and reasoning that's going on in any moment. I have oftentimes been accused of being too much like Spock and very logical, and then they say the longest journey is from your head to your heart, and so sometimes I have to just take a deep breath and drop down, into the feels, take a moment to recognize what's going on, either for me or for someone else, and not just be all business, business, business about it, because that's kind of my default setting in the white normative culture. The way I've been raised is just like business, 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 drive it with logic and reasoning, as opposed to, we're human beings and there's feelings going on here, and there's history and there's trauma and there's all this other stuff going on. So if I can recognize, what is honestly going on with me or going on with others, then I can step into that generative dialogue with a much more open mind, or even recognize, oh, okay, feelings are coming up right now. I can see we're really activated. Let's just take a moment to drink some water and take a break and come on back. So having that empathic intelligence while we do generative dialogue, oh, could be so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And then finally, and kind of all of this wraps up into appreciative inquiry, which we talked about last time.
Mhm.
And it's so cool because it's actually what we are currently using to create Circles USA's next 3-year strategic plan, right? But really, this appreciating the strengths of everyone in the room and asking those powerful and curious questions. And so to me, generative dialogue and appreciative inquiry kind of like come together. They go hand in hand. The one requires the other, and the other requires the
Mhm.
one, of utilizing, standing on the foundation of our strengths, all of us together, to create something new and really ask, like, what is possible from this vantage point of where we're at and where we want to go. Like, what is possible, what can we create together that is brand new, something that we have never seen before.
Mm, that's so amazing. I love how all this just walks together. And when you think about it in the context of Big View, of the systems change that our local chapters and then our national Big View team is all working towards, it's all happening in the circles way, in the context of relationships and values and transformational practices. And we know that long-term sustainable change only happens when there is that narrative change and that empathic, open-minded growth mindset. So all of that is essential for the big view work and for our mission and vision at Circles.
Ah, yes. Yes. So, as we're kind of summing up all of these different things, if there's any that you're like, wait, what? I missed that one. Go back and check it out. It's up on season 2 right now on our website, circlesusa.org. And I'm gonna give a little teaser because we actually do know. So season 3 is gonna be coming in the spring, and it's actually gonna be a spin-off series called Lives Transformed. And we're really gonna be digging into um, the heart of circles, our circle leaders in season 1 and our allies in season 2 of how this work has transformed individual lives in our communities. So that's my little like quick teaser on season 3 because I'm super excited about it. And we're so grateful that you've joined us for this for season 2 of the Big View on big view mindsets and shifting of our mindsets. And yeah, thanks for being here with us, and we'll see you next year.
Take good care.